Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, President Trump's Board of Peace for Gaza meets in Washington amid escalating threats of war in the Middle East. Plus, political expert Karys Rhea looks at what could be a hijacking of conservatism in the U.S. And from Hannah in the Bible to now, the ancient city of Shiloh is still a place of prayer for women and families. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl. In the Middle East, war and peace hang in the balance. President Trump is considering military action against Iran while pledging billions to rebuild Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel and U.S. forces are preparing for what may come next. Here's the latest.
Threats of war escalate in the Middle East as the U.S. military buildup continues. This graphic shows the recent buildup of U.S. air power in the Middle East. The Wall Street Journal reporting it's the largest in the region since the Iraq War in 2003. In Israel, the IDF Home Front Command has been directed to prepare for full-scale war. Iran is holding joint naval exercises with Russia and the Chinese. The regime is also calling on Hezbollah to join them in the event of a U.S. military strike.
There's many reasons and arguments that one could make for a strike against Iran.
U.S. military officials say they're ready to strike as early as Saturday. Leavitt reiterated that little progress was made during Wednesday's nuclear talks.
Diplomacy is always his first option, and Iran would be very wise to make a deal with President Trump and with this administration.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth told CBN News the decision to strike Iran lies with President Trump.
Should they not follow through on commitments, should they not be willing to make a deal, the president has an option. The only one that will make this decision, well, two people will make this decision. The Iranians can step up and make a real deal, and then ultimately President Trump will decide whether or not it's a deal that's good enough for the American people.
Middle East political analyst Esther Braun says any deal with Iran should come with reservation. Braun recently wrote this Times of Israel article titled "Built to Deceive: Why Iran Can't Make a Real Deal," where she explains the Iranian Islamic tactic known as taqiyya.
Taqiyya was a survival mechanism. The believer could conceal his faith, conceal his style of life to save his life, to save his property, to save his community.
Braun says Western diplomacy wants to resolve conflicts. Iranian culture uses taqiyya to manage it.
It's not like they're lying because they have a purpose to lie. It's just the way how they see the whole process of negotiations.
While U.S. military officials say they're prepared to strike Iran as early as Saturday, President Trump is weighing his options.
So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is considering an initial attack on Iran, possibly within days, to force it to meet U.S. nuclear demands. The limited strike options include attacks on nuclear and ballistic missile facilities. If Iran still wouldn't go along, the U.S. could launch a broader military campaign in an effort to potentially overthrow the Islamic government. The journal also reports that there is still a wide gap with negotiations. Iran is refusing to limit its ballistic missile program and has said that no country can deprive it of its right for nuclear enrichment.
And now is the time for Iran to join us on a path that will complete what we're doing. And if they join us, that'll be great. If they don't join us, that'll be great too. But it'll be a very different path.
If that path results in a full-scale war, a former U.S. Central Command deputy tells the Jerusalem Post the American military could dismantle Iran's power structure core within hours. Meanwhile, the European Union has formally added Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to its terrorist list, as Iran warns in this letter to the UN that if attacked, all hostile bases and assets in the region would be considered legitimate targets. The USS Gerald R. Ford is equipped to counter Iranian strikes. The aircraft carrier is expected to be positioned off Israel's coast to protect Tel Aviv and Haifa.
We're prepared for any scenario. And one thing is certain, if the Ayatollahs make a mistake and attack us, they will face a response they can't even imagine.
And while there are preparations for war here in the Middle East, The president's Board of Peace held its first meeting in Washington. In the inaugural meeting, Trump pledged $17 billion toward the reconstruction of Gaza. The board's plan also included more than 30,000 international soldiers and police officers to replace Israeli soldiers in Gaza, with Israel again saying it won't withdraw troops unless Hamas disarms.
That includes all its weapons, its terror infrastructure, underground tunnel network, and weapons production facilities must all be dismantled. There must be a fundamental de-radicalization process. The infrastructure that indoctrinates Palestinian children to hate and kill Jews in educational and religious institutes should no longer exist.
Stahl Petitte, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I'm joined now by our Middle East correspondent, Stahl Petitte. Great stories, Paul, about a really tough subject.
Oh.
What do you think's coming?
Yeah, frightening stories as well. It's hard to say. We're in the sort of the chess game mode. I move this way, you move that. Trump constantly moving the timeline for when he might attack. Iran building up with Russia, doing drills with their Navy. So it's anyone's guess at this point. We'll just have to literally go day by day.
Yeah, the Jerusalem municipality sent out today this a little booklet, online booklet in multiple languages, and it's says to be ready for routine and unforeseen situations, but basically it's all about getting where you go if there's an attack, and how to prepare your home, and how to relate to your kids when you're in the bomb shelter. So it's clear that Israelis are preparing.
Yeah, and there's an app that you can only get when you're actually in Israel, Homefront Command it's called, which warns you of a missile attack. This is everyday life here in Israel for those that have never visited or been here, at certain times. And so, yeah, everyone's on high alert. Obviously, the command is on high alert here in Israel. Yeah. And what that means is everybody is poised. No one knows when it could happen, but we need to be prepared, as you're showing there. And an interesting footnote today, I learned that 59% of Israelis are in support of joining the U.S. Should there be an attack on Iran. Yeah,
I think because Israelis know if any deal with Iran is probably not going to go anywhere. They're just making a big show of the whole thing. They're not going to get rid of Hezbollah and Hamas. They want to keep funding them. So, for Israelis, that's very practical. I mean, it goes from terror attacks to war on the borders. It's not a simple thing. And, it's also the missile issue. They don't want to have anything. They want their missiles to defend themselves. Excuse me, but if they weren't aggressive, they wouldn't have to defend themselves.
Yeah, and so that's where we're at in this point in time. And I think it's interesting, the timing of the Board of Peace meeting, too, because it's sort of a model of what has to happen if it's done correctly in Gaza, what needs to happen in Iran. And the bottom line is that you just can't kick the can down the road and let them keep their missiles. In the case of Gaza, let them keep their arms, because it's only a matter of time until they get ready again, and there's another attack on Israel. So it's really a regime change that has to happen. And so that's going to be the next question. How is that going to happen? And obviously, many people in Iran want that to happen sooner the better.
Yeah, they do. And, Israel has proven time and time again that you can't just, because they're not changing their ideology, they're not changing their goal of destroying Israel and getting rid of the Jewish state. So if that's the case, then, you have to get rid of them first.
Yep, we'll see what happens.
Our next guest is an analyst and a bunker buster of misinformation about the relationship between Israel and Christians. She's an expert on culture and politics in the U.S. Here's her recent conversation with our bureau chief, Chris Mitchell.
Karys Rhea, great to be with you. You're with the Middle East Forum. Tell us some of the examples of the accusations against Israel. I've heard some of them, and they seem just extremely wild.
I mean, the one that the right is really pushing is that Israel persecutes Christians. You have Tucker Carlson on this Islamist tour now throughout the United States, and everywhere he goes, he seems to be focusing on the one country that he's not visiting, which is Israel, and trying to hammer home the point to American conservatives that Israel hates Christians. And it's just absolutely absurd because he hasn't talked to one Christian that actually lives in Israel. He'll talk to Christians in other countries, in Jordan and the UAE, and he'll talk to Christians that are in the Palestinian territories, but he won't talk to any Christians in Israel proper. And the accusations range from just, persecuting Christians, like legally by law, to just being very hostile to Christians here, just on a societal basis, to actually bombing Christian churches in Gaza. It's very sinister.
Yeah, and also killing thousands of babies.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, there's the whole genocide charge, right? I mean, all of the classic left-wing tropes are there as well. That Israel's committing genocide, that Israel's practicing apartheid and ethnic cleansing, and they stole the Palestinian land. So all that is there as well.
And
but there's
Candace
some new
Owen?
flavors on the right.
Candace Owen as well.
Oh, yeah. For sure. And those are just the names that most people know, but it's much bigger than Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. There are podcasters and influencers that have millions of followers across various social media channels that people like you and I would just normally never hear of because they're really focused on influencing the youth.
Right.
And they do. And they're pushing a lot of this stuff as well. I mean, you have people like Ian Carroll, who Tucker Carlson's quite a fan of, who pushes just the most vile conspiratorial lies about Jews controlling everything that you can name, right? For their sinister and power motives. And there's so many of them. A lot of these people are just outwardly praising, Franco's version of fascism or Mussolini. Not as much. I mean, there's some Hitler praising as well, but in terms of like actual fascism, they're advocating for that system of governance, and they're using Franco and Mussolini as an example of how well it works. So,
what are the consequences?
Oh, they're tremendous because culture shapes politics. We've all heard the expression that politics is downstream from culture. I mean, once you move the needle on culture, then that can have a real effect and drift upward towards until you get to state-sanctioned policy. But if we actually want to keep this guttural rhetoric on the fringes, then we need to start that work now. Otherwise, there's a very good chance that we're going to end up just like the Democratic Party, where you just had a few extremist members known as the Squad, and everybody thought, oh, it's just a few radical progressives. The Democrat Party is largely just classical liberal, right? And now what do you have? You have a completely captured Democratic Party. There is no middle anymore.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I would just say for anybody watching your show, probably most of your viewers are concerned more with what's happening on the left. And I understand the left controls our institutions. In terms of threats to our country, the left wing, the radical progressives, the neo-Marxists, they are significantly greater than what we see on the right. But if we want to preserve conservatism, if we want to preserve, Christianity, in the way that Jesus Christ actually envisioned it, then this is something that all of your viewers cannot ignore.
Well, Karys, thanks for putting a spotlight on this. It's very, very timely and very important.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Paul, that was quite an interview. You've been here 3 times since the summer. What have you experienced?
Well, certainly not anything that's being described there. And to your point, yes, I've been here plenty of times, and I haven't experienced any of that. Going to those particular places here in Jerusalem, particularly, and everywhere, it's pretty much it's open. And I don't know where Tucker and Candace, particularly anybody on the right now, is coming from, because the persecution they described, there's 1,000 pastors here just last winter. So if there's real persecution, you'd think we would see it. And of course, the Jerusalem Bureau here in the Middle East has been here for decades. You've lived here for over 10 years. What's been your experience?
Yeah, things happen here, that's for sure. It's not condoned. In general, it's not condoned at all. There was an attack of vandalism in the cemetery on Mount Zion and by a few Jewish students. And a huge group of Jewish people showed up to say, no, this isn't us. We're, Israelis. This is not us. We don't do this. There's other things, plenty of other things where the Christians are the most highly educated part of the Israeli society. So, and those are Arab Christians. So it's really not accurate to say that Christians are persecuted here. Okay, they're a minority, and things happen, but that happens everywhere.
Do you think it's a selective interviewing? In other words, we're going to pick people to be on our show like Tucker does for this, or is he getting a general consensus?
Well, I think, he didn't even stay in Israel, so he didn't even interview people here. He didn't go to Nazareth. He didn't go to the Galilee. He didn't interview our friend Shadi Khalul, who's an Aramaic Christian, and who wanted to tour him around, and he never answered. So I think there's a lot of misinformation here. But Paul, you interviewed somebody who was right there with the Mike Huckabee interview. Yeah,
actually, I interviewed Melissa Francis, and Melissa was out here promoting her new film, The Prophet, which is going to be coming out in the United States in March. And she's also a journalist and an actor as well. And she was the one who actually brokered this interview, which President Trump wanted Carlson to come out here to try to quiet the conservative bend on anti-Israel. And it was interesting because she told me what went on in there and sort of the feeling is how this all came to be. Let's take a look at the video. So Tucker Carlson recently had an interview with Mike Huckabee at the airport. Didn't last very long. Understand you were instrumental in bringing that together.
I was having lunch with Tucker, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I was showing him pictures from Israel. And he said, God, I'd love to go. And I said, let's go. You should come. And he said, I don't know. There's been a lot of tension. I'm not sure I would be welcome. It ended up being at the airport for whatever reason. I don't know. And I'll just say, it was fascinating. It was a lot, Tucker asked a lot of questions that I know Americans are asking. And, Ambassador Huckabee really corrected him on things that he's heard Tucker say that just aren't accurate about how Christians are treated here in Israel. It was tense at times, for sure. But hopefully, the president wanted it to kind of turn down the heat. I'm not sure that was achieved. Maybe it was, but there you go. I know that on the way out, he talked about, that he was detained at the airport. I would just say on my way in, my luggage was dumped out. They went through my passport. I always get pulled into the room that he's talked about. I don't know what that's about. I think it's about a country that has people come in and blow stuff up.
Now, since then, Julie, videos come out from the airport showing Tucker Carlson in this so-called detainment area where he smiles and takes a picture with one of the airport workers. And the Israel envoy has said that, this did not happen. It's nothing but what may typically happen when you come to a country like Israel, where they may question you, ask you what your intentions are, or what did you do while you were here?
Yeah, I know. And he was in the VIP lounge. I've never been in the VIP lounge.
That's a whole other issue, yeah.
Yeah, I just really want to say, Tucker, you're a journalist. Do your research. Look, come here and get out of the airport and interview Christians that live here, not just on the other side of the Jordan like he did in his long piece. Interview the Christians who live in Nazareth. This year, Israel invested a huge amount of money in Christmas in Nazareth. Does that sound like it's anti-Christian? No. I mean, things do happen. We know that, but it's just not right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were confused as why would you go to the airport, do the interview, then fly right back out? If really the topic of what you're trying to do is Christian persecution, here in Israel, then, go and see if that's actually happening. So I did talk to Melissa, and I wanted to know when this piece was going to air. She doesn't know yet. She couldn't go into the details, unfortunately, of what was discussed, other than to say it got tense at moments. But she did say that for the interview to take place, Huckabee demanded that it be shown in its entirety, no edits. This way you can sort of create your own narrative. Yeah. And from that, I guess the public could decide for themselves. No air date yet, but it's going to be interesting because I think Tucker Carlson certainly, as you know, is going to meet his match with Mike Huckabee, two very good people when it comes to debate.
War and the trauma of living under missile fire take a toll on the spirit. As a former war correspondent and embedded reporter, I can vouch for the fact that war changes you. But it doesn't have to be forever. CBN Israel helps Israelis in need every day with trauma counseling, food, shelter, and more.
Thanks to CBN, I was able to bring the caravan here, already provide an extra 30 hours of therapy that weren't provided before. So whether some of those are groups of 3 kids, it's already ×3 for those groups. And whether it's one-on-one for the kids, though, we think that it's more important to give them the one-on-one. That in itself is huge because we lack therapists and we lack the facilities. And the animal-assisted therapy is super helpful. And to be able to bring the animals to them is bringing not just therapy, but it's bringing a really unique and successful type of therapy.
If you want to be a part of what CBN is doing in Israel, go to cbnisrael.org. Thank you.
3,000 years ago, in Samaria, a woman asked God for a son, and he answered her prayer. Today, on that same ground, people are still praying and getting answers. Here's Joshua Swanson with the story from Ancient Shiloh.
Long before Jerusalem became Israel's capital, this was the center of worship. Scripture says that the tabernacle stood here for nearly 400 years.
Our history began here 3,000 years ago. When the people of Israel, we came back from Egypt. Egypt is all the way back down there. And we crossed Sinai Desert. We went all the way around. And then we entered Israel through Jordan.
Over the years, CBN News has covered major events here and groundbreaking archaeological discoveries.
And we're smack in the center of Ancient Shiloh. So how do we know this is Ancient Shiloh? When an archaeologist comes to an ancient site, they have a dream to find 3 things. Some kind of a verse with an explanation, an inscription, doesn't have to say Hannah was here, but some kind of an inscription, and the preservation of the ancient Hebrew biblical name. And here we found all 3.
Moriah Shapiro explains that Shiloh continues to draw people today for reasons beyond its ancient history.
I got here when I was 1 year old. It was 1978, when this area was completely empty. My family were part of a group that had a dream to find ancient Shiloh and to build it again. People come here from all over the world to pray in the place where Hannah actually prayed.
Among those visitors include the Flynns and Burnses, who traveled thousands of miles to stand where the book of 1 Samuel unfolded. This is where Hannah, barren, mocked, and misunderstood, silently poured out her heart to God, and God answered, giving her a son who would become the prophet Samuel.
What I realize is that the same God that Hannah prayed to then is the God we serve now. And it's unmistakable, because when you stand on the land where she prayed, you feel the sense of the Holy Spirit. I just had my 10-year-old son say to me, "Mom, I think I was saved right then when we were praying."
Believers say the same God who answered Hannah's prayer still answers prayer today. Women from Israel and around the world come here with hopes of having children, and many leave with testimonies of answered prayer. Local resident Eliana Passington continues to carry the tradition of prayer forward.
So 32 years ago, Hannah from Miami comes here and prays for a boy, for a baby boy. 9 months later, she gives birth to a son and names him Samuel. But the story doesn't end here.
Years later, Eliana would meet the next generation of that family, arriving at Shiloh once again.
She said, "I can't get pregnant naturally, and you told us to pray here." And I prayed for a boy and a girl. This is my boy, and this is my girl. Every single time I tell the story, somebody has a tear rolling down their cheek. I've never prayed before. Can you tell me how to do it?
2 generations of answered prayers, although Eliana is careful to point people to the heart of the message.
The moral of the stories is not come to Shiloh, touch the stones, and you'll be cured. Not at all. It's about being humble when we speak to God from a place of humility.
For Carolyn Burns, that truth is deeply personal.
God saw her, and God hears our prayers, and like Hannah, to come in humility and desperation for that longing. It's humbling. Easton is a gift because he's a miracle child to our family after a season of loss. So I prayed Hannah's prayer for our family because I knew our family wasn't complete, and he's my Hannah's prayer.
I implore you to bring your requests, make them known to a God who is living and breathing and as alive and willing to answer them as he was 3,000 years ago today.
Here, archaeology confirms the Bible. Prayer bridges past and present, and answered prayer testifies to an unchanging God. Joshua Swanson reporting from Ancient Shiloh for CBN News.
What an encouraging story from Shiloh. That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. Please keep praying for Israel, the peace of Jerusalem, and for all those caught in harm's way. And pray especially for the protection of the people of Iran who are crying out for freedom. Remember, the God who's watching over Israel and you and me neither slumbers nor sleeps. I'm Julie Stahl. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.